Let me refresh. I see. Can you see it? Yeah. All right, we're on. Thank you everyone who's tuning in. I'm Mrs. Langarello. I'm on the call with Mrs. Jolio. Can you see it? Yeah. And all right, we're on. Thank you everyone who's tuning. Okay. There we go. I apologize. This is my first time live streaming a presentation, so we're trying to work out the kinks, but I think we're all good. I think we're live streaming on YouTube. So I'm also going to be recording this presentation on Zoom, just in case anything goes wrong with our internet connection. So I'm going to do that right now, and then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll get started. Okay, thank you all for bearing with me. Again, I'm Mrs. Langarello. I'm the College and Career Counselor here at BHS. Also on the call with me is Mrs. Jolio, one of our other counselors and our team lead. We are very excited to bring you the senior college presentation, our annual presentation. Although we're disappointed we can't be with you in person, we're thankful that technology allows us to connect in this way. So just so you know, this presentation, as I mentioned, will be recorded. I'll be sending out the recording and the presentation slides to all seniors and parents later. If you do have a question, you can continue to submit those questions during the presentation using the form that I emailed out earlier. Mrs. Jolio will be monitoring those questions, and we'll make sure that we answer any of those at the end of the presentation. So before we start out, I just want to acknowledge that this is a very unusual school year, obviously, and I'm sure it's hitting our senior families and students especially hard. So I just want to reiterate that everyone at BHS, especially the counseling staff, we are all here for you to help you and support you through this senior year and your post-high school planning process. To that end, we are doing our best to stay connected with you and help keep you informed. So just a few reminders, students, if you haven't already completed that senior check-in survey, go ahead and do that just to give me a sense of where you are in your process and how I can help. Also, if you haven't already, joined our Counselor's Corner Google Classroom for your graduating class. I'll be posting a lot of information there and updates. Obviously, I'll be sending out emails, so make sure you're reading those as well as our monthly newsletter. You can drop by my virtual office hours every Wednesday. I have 2 different time slots. You can also schedule an appointment with me using the QR code that's listed on the school counseling website. And there's also the Google form version of that. So obviously there are many options that students can pursue after high school, college being one of them. I'm working on organizing a post-high school options other than college presentation. So I'll be sending out more information about that hopefully soon for any students who might want to investigate other possibilities aside from college. But tonight's presentation will just focus on students who are looking to go to a college or university after graduating from BHS. Okay, I do have a lot of information to go over tonight, so I apologize in advance. I will try to be quick while also being thorough. So we talk a lot about finding the fit. That is our goal. We want students to find a good fit, and I especially like this quote. College is a match to be made, not a prize to be won. So I just think it's good to keep this whole process in perspective. There are literally thousands of colleges and universities in the United States and around the world. We tend to hear about the same handful over and over again. I want students and parents to keep an open mind as you go through this process. Where you end up might not be where you think you are going to end up. And we want you to just figure out what's going to be the best fit for you. And hopefully this presentation will help you know how you can go about doing that. So when you're finding the fit, trying to find the fit, you want to think about what's important to you in terms of academics, in terms of the social environment, and in terms of your financial situation. So considering colleges that offer the academic programs that you are interested in, that provide the type of instruction and the type of setting that that works best for you and your learning style, whether that's a large lecture class that you might find at a big public university, or a small discussion-based class that is maybe going to be more common at a small private university. We also want you to find a good match for your level of ability. So we want you to go to a college where you're being challenged, but not overwhelmed. Also, like I said, the social environment is important, finding a place that feels like home, especially if you'll be living on campus. And then, as I mentioned, we want to have you explore colleges that are going to be in line with your financial situation, both now and what you see for yourself after you graduate. So just expanding on all of those points, there are many resources out there to help you identify potential colleges that match your needs. I've already talked at length with students and families about Naviance and College Board. So I have those links here, and I have just some reminders about students' login information. Both of those websites have college search features that can be very helpful in figuring out which schools might be a good fit for you. College Express is another website linked here that can be useful for that purpose. And the RUGS recommendations on the colleges guide is one that I use quite often with students and families. So I know I gave out many of these lists during junior advisement. If you have a major or maybe a few majors that you are interested in and would like that list from RUGS, just let me know and I can give you that copy. So there are many online opportunities available to help you explore colleges, which is good because right now, many colleges have limited in-person interactions. So whether it's a virtual tour, a virtual admission session, information session, or even a one-on-one Zoom call with an admissions counselor, colleges have really stepped up their game in terms of allowing students to interact with them virtually amid this kind of unusual world. So I've included on the slide some websites that you can use to identify, virtual opportunities at colleges, virtual tours. Of course, you can go to any college's website on their admissions page to see that specific information as well. And then there are also virtual college fairs. I've included a few here. I'm sure there are more out there, the NACAC Fair and also the EduCanada Fair for any students interested in colleges or universities in Canada. Virtual college reps this year, as it says in the title, all of our college reps will be virtual, visits will be virtual. I've already emailed a lot of information about these visits, although we're not getting a great student response yet. So I'm really going to emphasize today the importance of taking advantage of those opportunities to meet with college representatives that you probably won't get a chance to meet in person, and especially if you haven't visited campus. This is another opportunity to learn about the school, ask questions that you have, and connect with the person who is most likely going to be the first person who reads your application and might actually be the person who takes that application to a committee and advocates for why you should be admitted. So I can't emphasize enough the value of these visits. How they'll work this year, they're open to our juniors and seniors, only students, not parents. They'll be all virtual, as I mentioned, after school hours, Monday through Friday. So we actually have 7 slots available for colleges to sign up each day. The first one starting at 2:30 and then going all the way until the last one that starts at 5:30. So the visits are 30 minutes in length. I've included a link to a more comprehensive presentation that I already sent out with instructions for how students can access the list of schools that have scheduled a visit. Make sure you're checking back because schools are scheduling visits every day. Another reason to join our Google Classroom is that you can then see that class of 2021 Google Calendar along with your own calendar, and the college rep visits will be listed there as well. So a second reminder. So please take some time if you haven't already to take a look at that list and sign up for some of our visits. As you are finalizing your list of schools, so we've talked about different ways that you can be researching and interacting with schools and learning about them and deciding which ones seem to meet your need. As I said, it's important to keep finances in mind. There's nothing worse than when a student applies to schools, has a top choice school in mind, gets into that school, and then finds out later that it's just not financially viable to attend that school. And I know you won't find out the final number of financial aid, scholarship money until after you've received an admission decision, but there are ways that you can estimate that cost of attending that school. So I've included a few points here. The FAFSA forecaster tool can be useful in determining your expected family contribution That is going to be one of the main factors used to determine how much aid you get from schools, in addition to possibly grades and maybe test scores. Also, each college is required to have a net price calculator on their website where they'll have questions for you to answer. Some are more extensive than others, and they're meant to estimate how much you will likely pay per year at that institution. So using these two tools together can give you a good idea of how much you can expect to pay. While we're talking about finances, I just want to highlight other ways to make college more affordable. The New England Regional Tuition Break Program is an agreement of public institutions in New England where if a student from Connecticut wanted a major that was not available at any public institutions in Connecticut, and sometimes other majors as well, they could attend a public institution in New England at a reduced cost through this agreement. So I've included links to all of these programs. QuestBridge is a scholarship program for high achieving low income students. UConn's Connecticut Commitment is a tuition agreement for students who come from households making less than $50,000. Commuting is a way that some students choose to save money, whether that's to a branch campus of UConn or Western Connecticut State or Sacred Heart or another close school. And then community college can be a great option for students, especially students who might want to start out there and move on to a four-year college or university. Last year, Connecticut rolled out its PACT program, allowing eligible students, which is pretty much any student, to attend community college for free. Just a little bit more about community college. Obviously, there are many benefits, not only the cost savings, but sometimes students aren't ready to live somewhere else, live far away from home. They want to try out college. So many benefits to community college. Connecticut has many transfer programs that make it very easy for students to start out at community college, complete 2 years, and then be guaranteed transfer to another college or university. So I've listed a few of those programs here. We have the GAP program through the University of Connecticut, the Connecticut Transfer Ticket program where students can transfer to one of our other state institutions. And then we also have the College of Technology Pathways for students interested in engineering or technology programs. And that allows transfer to some of our other private universities in addition to our public ones. So I encourage you to check out those programs. As students are finalizing that list of schools, just some information to help with that process. On average, I would say students apply to between 6 to 10 colleges. Of course, there are students who apply to fewer, students who apply to more, but that's the average just to give you an idea. Regardless of how many schools you're applying to, you want to make sure you have a mix of safety, target, and reach schools. And that is based on how likely it is that you will probably be admitted, which I know sometimes is hard to say, but there is information that you can use to help determine kind of your chances. One of those tools is Naviance. We have our scattergrams that show data about BHS students who have applied to those universities or colleges in the past and whether they've gotten accepted. And those data points are based on their GPA and test scores. Obviously, some schools are test optional, so students might not have submitted test scores, so that is important to keep in mind. Students can also try to get information about a school's freshman profile or their most recently accepted class. That is sometimes posted on the school's website. If not, students can reach out to the admissions office or just connect with an admissions representative. Another reason why our virtual visits are so great, and get an idea of the students last year who were accepted. What did their grades and possibly test scores look like? And there are other websites out there that can help. I listed college data on this slide as well. I would say, often students have too many reach schools and not enough target and safety schools. And when I say safety, sometimes that has a negative connotation. That should be a school that a student genuinely wants to go to, could see themselves at and be happy at. It shouldn't just be a throwaway school. Oh, I definitely know I'll get in there. So students, make sure you're doing your research and identifying appropriate schools that are all good fits for you. Just one last word about finding that fit As I alluded to earlier, there are a lot of schools out there, but we tend to hear about the same schools over and over again. Keep those rankings and labels in perspective. Those lists can often be very subjective in the way that they're put together. And often it's not the school's name, their reputation, but it's what a student does while at that school that's going to make the difference in their success there and their success after. And I included a link to an interesting article for anyone who's interested. We want students to explore opportunities that are available at different schools and pick the school that's going to allow them to maximize their experience. That might mean getting into a school that's not quite as competitive, but has a wonderful honors program that comes with a scholarship or study abroad opportunity. That might mean going to a school that's located in a great area and has a partnership with a company that the student is really interested in working for. And also, it's just important to remember the big picture. If students are already thinking about going on to graduate school, they might want to save that financial investment and wait to apply to that more competitive graduate school and go to a more affordable but still quality undergraduate institution. Okay. So now moving on to the college application process. The goal of the application is really just to give colleges a sense of who you are and what you have to offer to their campus. And there are many different ways that you are going to do that through your application that I'll talk about. Most colleges take a holistic approach to the application process, meaning they're trying to get a sense of you as the whole person, and they're looking at many different factors in order to make their decision. Always, colleges are going to read students' applications in context. That's why you have to fill out information about your family. That's why we as a school submit a school profile. So colleges know, kind of where you're coming from and what kind of opportunities you had at your disposal. Even more so in this year, colleges are going to read applications keeping the context in mind, meaning that all students were living through a pandemic. And don't forget that these college admissions counselors, they're people too on the other side of this process reading applications. They and their families have lived through this process as well. So they are going to be understanding of the limitations that were placed on students, whether that's related to standardized testing, whether that's related to participation in an activity or a sport or community service. So just keep that in mind. So this chart gives you an idea of some of the different elements of the college application. So you can see on the left side of the chart, different factors, and then colleges have ranked how important those factors are in their admission process. This chart might look a little bit different this year in terms of standardized testing, but you can see that grades and coursework that students have taken in high school are across the board the most important component that colleges are looking at. Because you're going to college to get an education, they want to know, what you've done in high school regarding your education and what your potential is going to their institution. So as students are starting the college application process, and I know some of you might be thinking, where do I even start? Maybe you're feeling behind, maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. It's okay, we'll get through it, we're here to help. But here are just some easy steps to get you started. So once you have that list of prospective schools, identify your application deadlines and admission requirements. Make sure you have a system for keeping all of that information organized. And I have a few different spreadsheet templates included here. And then I've already emailed these resources out, but these are 3 main resources that are going to help you navigate the college application process as it applies to Brookfield High School and making sure that we submit everything that you will need in time. So I'll talk more about these resources on a later slide. So those application deadlines that I mentioned, so I'll talk a little bit about the different types of application deadlines. Some schools offer early application options, and there's a few different options that I'll go over. Typically, those deadlines fall in November and December. There are some earlier deadlines in October. Usually those are schools that are in the South. And I also want to point out that some of these schools, and I think it's becoming more common, some of these schools offer a round 1. An early application and then a round 2. So give students kind of 2 chances if things haven't worked out the way they wanted to in round 1. So what are the different types of early applications? So early decision, that is an agreement where, and this is for a situation if a student has a top school in mind and they have fallen in love with the school, they know they would attend if they were accepted, they know they could attend if accepted. without seeing the financial aid and scholarship package, students can apply to one school early decision, and that is a binding agreement. They are saying that if they are accepted by that school, then they definitely will attend. So again, only applying to one school early decision, and that's assuming that the school offers it. Many schools don't. Early action is an option that more students take advantage of. So this is not a binding agreement. Students are just applying earlier, and then they are receiving a decision earlier. So for students who are feeling, ready to apply when it comes closer to those early action deadlines, I would encourage them to go ahead and take advantage of applying early, getting those applications done, and finding out sooner if you've been accepted. Early decision gives students a slight statistical advantage in the admission process, which is one of the main reasons why students opt to apply early decision. Early action does not give students an advantage in the admission process. Again, it's more for the benefit of the student. So if you're considering early decision, I'm happy to talk with you about it. You can also look a little bit more into the school and how much of their incoming class is usually made from early decision applications. Some schools take, almost half of their incoming students through early decision, and others don't value it as much or don't take it as big of a percentage from the early decision round. Some schools, a few, also offer what's called restrictive or single choice early action. So this is a non-binding agreement. So students, if they are accepted, they're not saying they will definitely attend this school, but it is limiting in that students are saying if they apply restrictive or single choice early action, they will not apply early, either early action or early decision, to any other private institutions. So if there are questions about that, feel free to reach out to me if you encounter any schools on your list that use this restrictive early action and you're confused, because I know it can be confusing. Some schools have a priority deadline, UConn being one example, and this can be confusing what the difference between priority and early action is. Priority deadlines are typically earlier than the regular deadline. So for example, UConn's deadline is in December 1st, as opposed to their regular deadline of January 15th. And students are not finding out any sooner if they've been accepted, as if they applied during January, but they are having to apply by December 1st if they want to be considered for scholarships, for the honors program, or for any special programs. So that's typically what a priority deadline indicates, but it's best to check with each individual school with what exactly that means. And then there are regular decision deadlines. Students apply by a certain date, and then there's a specific date when all decisions are released. And then some schools have rolling admission, meaning they are reviewing applications as they get them, and they are starting to send out applications. So similar to early action, if students are ready to apply and a school has rolling admission, I would encourage them to go ahead and apply, especially if they're applying to any competitive programs that may have caps on the number of students whom they accept. So this is, again, going through that checklist. So you're first identifying your admission deadlines and then your requirements. If you go to the admissions page of any college, you'll be able to see what they require. For the application, often colleges will give students the option to complete either their own application or a standardized application like the Common Application or the Coalition application. Occasionally, colleges will waive the application fee if a student uses their own institutional application. But in general, if students are applying to several schools who utilize the Common App or the Coalition app, I would say that those application platforms just streamline the application process and make it easier. I already mentioned the application fee. Those usually range between $20 and $100. I would say the average is about 50. So keep that in mind when you're generating that list of schools, and keep in mind that application fee and how that might add up. These other components of the application process we will go through and talk about. Portfolios, auditions, and interviews, those are less often required, but sometimes they are recommended. If any piece of the application is a recommended component, I always encourage students to take advantage of that. So the college application process at BHS, as I mentioned, I already emailed out these 3 documents. They're also available on our Google Classroom and our counseling website. This first document, the college application checklist, I tried to simplify this process as much as possible and put it into a simple step-by-step checklist for students. So I encourage students, if you want to print this out, hang it on your refrigerator or wherever and go back to it just to make sure you're kind of following the steps and doing everything you need to do to submit materials by the deadline. It's really important to emphasize that you need to complete all the steps on the front page and steps 10 and 11 on the back if you're needing letters of recommendation before you request transcripts or request letters of recommendation in Naviance. The second document, the detailed guide to the college application process, this is a more comprehensive guide. It goes over all of the different components of the application process and really explains them in detail using screenshots, using detailed information. So if you have a question about any part of the process, please refer to this detailed guide first. You're likely to find the answer there. This detailed guide also includes, I just want to highlight, information about how to complete the different sections of the Common App, especially the education section where it's asking about grades and ranking. We use deciles, by the way, and weighting. So check out that guide. You'll be able to see how to fill out that section and which decile you're in based on your cumulative GPA. This last document is a timeline that you can follow along with, a general timeline. Obviously, the application process will be different for each student, but just in general, a month-by-month breakdown of what you should be doing senior year to stay on track. So this graphic just kind of shows who's responsible for submitting which pieces of the application. So on the left, we see the students responsible for submitting the application, the fee, the essay, the supplemental essays, which are all contained within the application. Test scores we'll talk about, and then financial aid and scholarship applications. The school is responsible for submitting all of those school documents, including the transcripts, letters of recommendation, and grades if students request them. There are just certain steps that students need to take in a certain time frame in order to make sure everything gets submitted, and I'll go over those. So, Common Application. As I mentioned, the Common Application is a standardized online application platform. It's used by over 900 colleges and universities. So students would go to commonapp.org to create an account. I know many already have. This Common App tab is the information that is sent to all schools. So I've given a bit of information about all of those different sections. So the education, as I said, that information I won't be emailing out. It's included in that detailed guide. The testing, it's up to students if they want to put their test scores in this portion of the Common App, and I'll talk more about standardized testing later. The activity section gives students a chance to list up to 10 activities they've been involved in. And they should really start out that list with the most kind of important or impressive activities where they've had the most impact. And I'll be sending out some additional resources about the activity list, resumes, and essays to assist students with those different components. So be looking out for those in the next week or so. Writing, that's where students are going to put the essay, and the courses and grades section, that should only be completed if at least one of the colleges or universities on the students list requires it. And it'll show you right in your application under that section if any of your colleges require it. If they don't, do not fill it out. There is no need to. The My Colleges tab is where students will see all the colleges they've added to the Common Application. And that's where they'll answer questions for each individual college that will just go to that college. Within that section, students might have the option to upload a resume, like for UConn, for example, and there also might be supplemental essay questions contained within that individual question section. So this is a great way for students to demonstrate interest in the school. So I really encourage students to tailor those responses to the individual institution. The recommenders and FERPA section, this is where students need to give the school permission to send their school documents. So send their transcripts, send their letters of recommendation. Those documents are private and protected. So students need to grant us that permission. And students will also have the option of whether to waive, meaning give up their right to see their letters of recommendation being submitted on their behalf. Colleges like to see that students have waived that right. It just shows that students trust the process, and students and families are not influencing that process of letters of recommendation in any way. And then this is where students will actually submit each individual application using the review and submit feature. So a bit more about that college essay. So the purpose is really to give colleges more insight into who students are, aside from a list of grades and maybe test scores. So I often encourage students to think about everything that will be included in the application, including that activity section, and think about anything else they may want to include or they may want to share with colleges that isn't already apparent in their application. So trying to choose a different topic that hasn't been touched on anywhere else. The College Essay Guide has some great material and brainstorming exercises if you want to check those out. But really think about, what do you want to stick in the admissions counselor's mind? Keep in mind that admissions counselors are reading usually dozens, maybe even hundreds of applications in a single day. They're not going to be spending too much time on any one application. So after quickly reading your essay, what do you want them to take away from your essay and hopefully make it memorable? Think of it more as a narrative where you're telling a story rather than an academic essay with a thesis, and really focus on trying to show what you mean rather than simply tell. Your voice should come through clearly in the essay. It's always good to have someone look over the essay and provide feedback, but avoid having too many people look over it, because then your voice can be muddled. And colleges, they genuinely want to hear from high school students. So we don't want parents to get too involved in that essay where it's very clearly, or it sounds like it's been written by, someone who's a little bit older, maybe more professional than the student. So student voice, we want that to come through. As I mentioned, those supplemental essays, you really want to personalize those and connect it to yourself. So think about, what about the school is appealing to you and what you can bring to that school. And you want both of those elements present in the essay. And like I said, it's always good to get feedback. This year, there is an optional COVID question. This is going to be under the writing section, and it's going to say additional information. As I said, it's optional. For this prompt, it's going to ask if you have, been affected by COVID or anything else where you want to share that information with the college. So keep in mind, as I said, that students, families all over the world have been unfortunately affected by this pandemic. If you feel like you were affected more than the average high school student, which I know is a bit subjective, and I listed some ideas here. If you feel like you were affected more than the average, then take advantage of this section to respond to this prompt and give colleges a sense of how that was and how that may have impacted anything in your application. So that would be my advice for the COVID question. The resume is sometimes required, but often it's simply recommended. That's going to be an opportunity to elaborate on things that you've probably already mentioned in your application, from the activity section, from the honor section, but you're going to be able to elaborate more because you have more characters. You can edit the template, use the template that you like, organize the way that you like. So I would recommend uploading an essay or a resume, if you're given the chance. UConn is one example, and you can find that place to upload in their individual questions section that I already mentioned. So you can update your resume in Naviance that you probably already have started. And you can also, if you have a different format, that's fine too. And resumes, we ask for them if you would like a counselor letter of recommendation as well. If you would like me to review your essay, your supplemental essays, your activities list, or your resume, I'm happy to do so. Just go ahead, request an appointment with me. I prefer to speak about those different components. I think it's easier. And then go ahead and share your essay or your resume or whatever with me at least a day in advance. So I'll look over it, I'll have my notes ready, and then we can meet and I can give you my feedback. So aside from the actual application, there are other pieces of the application process that I've already mentioned that I just want to go through in terms of how you make sure that all of those get submitted. And remember, everything can be found in that checklist. So just to reiterate, because I know it can be confusing, Common App, that's the application. Students create that account. And that they go ahead and submit that application that includes all that information and the essay. Naviance is the platform that we use at school to submit all of those documents, including the transcript and the letters of recommendation. So just to clarify the difference there. So students are going to need to enter all of the colleges they're applying to in Naviance in addition to Common App. So this slide breaks down how to go about doing that. And then you just want to double check, make sure all the information and deadlines are correct within Naviance. And then what students are going to do is match your Naviance to your Common App account. And again, that checklist breaks down simple directions to do that, just to make sure that when everything gets submitted on the college side, it all matches up. Everything submitted through Naviance, everything submitted through Common App matches up electronically and ends up in your application file. Some important deadlines to point out. So when we're talking about requesting transcripts, letters of recommendation, the earlier the better, but at least 10 school days prior to an application deadline. So I've laid out those deadlines here, and I've also included them in the transcript request form. It's really important, especially because often we're writing a counselor letter of recommendation and teachers are writing recommendation letters. Really important that students adhere to these deadlines to make sure that we can get everything written and processed and submitted in time. So those teacher letters of recommendation, I know I talked about these during junior advisement, but just to reiterate a bit more. So colleges have different requirements. Some don't require any letters of recommendation. You can go on their website to see what their requirements are. Most colleges, I would say, require 1 letter of recommendation. Some require 2. No colleges require more than 2 letters of recommendation. So students should not be asking more than 2 teachers for letters of recommendation. It's about quality over quantity, and we want to be respectful of our teachers' time. Students should choose teachers who know them well. Often students choose junior year teachers with at least 1 being a core academic subject area. So ideally we want students to talk to teachers in person when asking for a letter, but under the circumstances this year, a polite professional email will suffice. And once teachers have agreed to write that letter, and there may be tasks they ask the student to complete, which we want you to do in a timely manner, those usually result in more specific, individualized letters. So do those happily, submit those back to the teacher, and then go ahead and submit that request in Naviance. Teachers do spend a lot of time on these letters, so a thank you note is always a nice thing to consider at the end. A little bit more about when students are inputting these requests in Naviance. So when students go into Naviance, they'll have the option, once they select the teacher, they can select that teacher's letter goes to all colleges and future colleges on their application list, or they can select the specific colleges one by one. So if they select the choose specific colleges option, that will generate a little chart based on what colleges you've already input into Naviance, and it will show you how many letters each school requires and how many they allow. So some schools will only allow 1 letter. So it's important that if you have 2 teacher letters of recommendation and you're applying to a school that only allows 1 letter, then make sure you're being thoughtful when you're choosing, which teacher's letter goes to all schools, and then which teacher's letter goes to every other school except for those schools that only allow 1 letter. I know that's a bit confusing, so hopefully that was clear. But essentially, you want to be the one to designate which teacher's letter goes to which schools, because if any schools only allow 1 letter and you requested 2 teachers and said those letters can go to all schools on your list, whichever teacher submits that letter first is going to be the letter that goes through in Naviance. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about that process. The counselor letter of recommendation is a component that's required by many colleges. This letter allows the counselor to provide kind of a broader picture of the student, not just in one class, but over 4 years at BHS. Outside of school also, the students, anything about the student and their role in the family or the community, and any background information that's important for the colleges to know. So to help us write this letter, if you need a counselor letter, there are 2 surveys to be completed on Naviance. There's a student input form for the student to complete, a parent input form for the parent to complete, and then we also want to see an updated copy of the resume. So that can be either through Naviance, so students make sure you either update that resume in Naviance, or you can share a copy with us if you want to share a Google document. And then on the transcript request form, you will indicate that you need a counselor letter of recommendation. So speaking of transcripts, you should have received an email from Mrs. Hopcroft last week with your unofficial transcript. So make sure you review that transcript. That's exactly what colleges will see, minus the unofficial watermark. So make sure you don't have any questions and don't see any potential errors. Colleges are looking at everything on the transcript. They're looking at your coursework all the way from 9th grade. They're looking at your grades from 9th through 11th grade. They're also looking at your senior year coursework to hopefully see that you're continuing to challenge yourself. So senior year does matter. I've included the link here, and it's also on the checklist and the detailed guide to the electronic transcript request form. So typically in the past, we've had paper gold transcript request forms. This year, we're using an electronic form. So once you have completed the necessary steps that are outlined here, then you can submit that transcript request form. Just make sure you do that at least 10 school days prior to an application deadline. You can list many schools on the transcript request form, and we will prepare that paperwork and send it to all of those schools. If you add any schools at a later time, then you can submit an additional transcript request form. We also send a secondary school report along with your transcript. That's where we are going to indicate your decile ranking. Some colleges will require or just allow students to submit a first quarter grade report or a first semester grade report. So I'll be sending information about those different reports later on after grades are finalized, and that will be a separate report. So the transcript does not get updated until after first semester grades have been finalized, at which point most students have submitted their applications and their initial transcripts. And then, as I mentioned, GPAs will not be recalculated until after first semester. That's what I meant by the transcript being updated. So a few steps to complete the application process. Standardized testing. I know I've been getting many questions. We just found out this week that we will be able to host the SAT school day at BHS on Wednesday, October 14th. So we're very excited about that. We know that many students and families were waiting anxiously to hear if that would happen with our hybrid schedule. But we are working on the details right now. That will be provided to seniors at no cost. It will include the evidence-based reading and writing and the math sections, not the essay. Seniors are not required to take the SAT this year as part of their graduation requirements, as they are typically required to do. But I imagine that most of our students will want to take advantage of this opportunity. So students who choose to test will be excused from classes on that Wednesday. Students who do not test will be expected to attend their virtual classes. I will be emailing out a form tomorrow to students and families. It's very important that you complete this in a timely manner to indicate to us if you plan to test at BHS and also if you need transportation. If you did want to register for any additional tests outside of the school day test, then you could do that on collegeboard.org or act.org. And we are, like I said, working out the details. So we'll be sending out more information about what that school day test will look like soon. More information about standardized testing. This year, many colleges that were not test optional in the past did adopt a test optional policy, which is very good for students and families considering the circumstances. If colleges do require tests or students opt to submit them, the ACT and SAT colleges view them in the same way. They don't have a preference. Some more competitive colleges have traditionally required or recommended SAT subject tests or the SAT or ACT with writing. Many of those colleges have changed their requirements this year because of everything going on. I wanted to go ahead and just define for you some terms and phrases you might have heard or will hear. Test optional is what you'll hear most common, meaning like it sounds, the student has the option to submit those scores. Test blind means that the institution will not be looking at scores for any applicants. And test flexible is one that you'll probably hear rarely, and that refers to some kind of adjustment in testing requirements. So it's really important that students check with the individual colleges. So either by going to the website or speaking with an admissions representative to determine if standardized test scores are needed. Fair Test is another website you can use to see a list of test optional schools. Also, it's important if you're considering submitting scores, if a school is test optional, that you know what the average test scores or the middle 50% range is for students who have been accepted to that university in the past. And again, you can go on the school's website, you may be able to find that there, or by speaking with an admissions representative. If a student's score falls near that average or within that middle 50% range, then I would recommend going ahead to submit those scores if you have the option. In addition, it's important that you know of any deadlines for submitting standardized test scores. So I just spoke with someone from our State Department of Education today. For that October 14th test, students will receive the scores on November 11th, and then those scores should be sent to colleges that students have indicated within 10 days. So it's important for students applying to any of those early deadlines in November to check with the college and ensure that that they will accept scores based on when they're being released. And my feeling is that most colleges will be accepting of those scores from our October test. And then another thing to check is how colleges need scores. So some colleges need the official score report that has to be requested through College Board or through ACT. Many colleges allow students to self-report scores directly in the application or by downloading a score report and sending it to the admissions office. So again, just important to know each school, what their policies are and what their deadlines and requirements are. So moving on to some other important components of this process, financial aid. We are working on organizing a financial aid night similar to this type of presentation. And I've been in contact with Julie Savino from Sacred Heart University. She'll be joining us again. So I'll be sending out information about that presentation soon. And again, hopefully it'll be a similar format. The financial aid applications, just to give you the basic information right now prior to financial aid night, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. We encourage all families to complete the FAFSA, as that will be the application used to determine if students qualify for any grants, loans, or work study opportunities. So I mentioned earlier the FAFSA forecaster tool that families can use to estimate the amount of federal aid they're likely to receive. I also included a link to a checklist here to help you start gathering information and documents that you may need for the FAFSA. The CSS profile is an additional financial application. It's used by some private colleges and universities. It's just going to go a bit more into more depth about a family's financial situation to help that college determine how they are distributing their institutional aid. October 1st is when families can begin filling out the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So ideally, we'll have our financial aid night right around that date to help you get started with those applications. So we have much more information about financial aid on our school counseling website. And I also included on this slide questions that students and parents can be asking to get more information about financial aid and scholarships from those different colleges and institutions. Going back to one of my earlier slides about the importance of kind of being aware, having those conversations early about finances and how that is going to play into the college application and decision-making process. So here's some questions that you might think about asking. In terms of scholarships, scholarships come from several different places. Many colleges and universities offer merit-based scholarships. Typically, students are automatically reviewed for those scholarships when they apply. Students should be looking into and asking about, if a school offers merit-based scholarships, what those scholarships are based on, whether that's GPA, maybe also test scores, maybe also additional components, and also the process for that review and if it's automatic or students need to do something additional. Students should also be aware of earlier deadlines for any scholarship applications. I already mentioned UConn's priority deadline of December 1st. We don't want students missing out on any chances for free money. Some colleges offer scholarships for students in specific majors or students who are admitted into an honors program. So again, just check that college's website and specifically the financial aid and scholarship page, or reach out to the college to inquire about any additional scholarships that students might apply for outside of that automatic review. Scholarships also come from other places outside of the colleges and universities. There are national scholarships out there. We have some websites and search engines listed on our counseling department website, so students can begin searching for scholarships they may qualify for. We also have many local scholarships offered through our local businesses, organizations, even just private citizens. So we will keep those scholarships updated in Naviance and also on a Google document. Those local scholarships don't typically become available until after the first of the year. So I'll be sending out more information about those later. And then students and families can also be thinking about any businesses, organizations, churches you're affiliated with that may also offer scholarships to employers, or I'm sorry, employees' children's, members, and just, reach out and see what's out there that students might qualify for. A few other factors I want to mention before wrapping up. Students who are interested in additional support services at a college or university, so specifically students who are currently on a 504 or IEP, should definitely consider researching those different services offered at college as part of the college search and application process. All colleges have an office dedicated to support services. They all call it something slightly different, but the type and degree of services can vary depending on the institution. Some colleges offer more robust programs, maybe for an additional fee, and I'm happy to have those conversations if you want to get recommendations on specific schools. But typically colleges will want to meet with students who are seeking those support services. It's not necessarily part of the application process, but once they've gotten admitted. So it's important that students are kind of an active participant in this process and know how the colleges that they're considering are going to help them meet their needs. And just as an aside, the school, we do not disclose to colleges if students are on one of those plans I mentioned. That's up to the student to disclose that information within the application. For students who are interested in athletics, I included just some information and statistics to keep everything in perspective. But the second main bullet point here is what I want to emphasize, that if you're interested in playing sports in college, there is a place for you, whether that's at the varsity level or at the club level or at the intramural level. High school coaches and club coaches can be a great resource for this process as they know the student's athletic ability. I know that some students are concerned that maybe their season was canceled in the spring or right now in the fall, and they're not sure how they'll be able to go through the typical recruiting process. So I really encourage you to talk to your coaches about their advice for going through this process. I think it'll be important for students to also be in communication with coaches at the college level to reach out, express interest, start asking questions about how they can go about learning about the college's athletic teams and also how they can demonstrate to that coach their level of ability. That'll look a little bit different this year, but coaches can be a great resource. I'm happy to help with that process. It's also important to note for students considering participation at a Division I or Division II school, they need to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center, and I've linked that website here. Just a few reminders. While I have attention from some people, students who are in a course that's eligible for our ECE program, if you want to take advantage of that program, I sent out an email yesterday with more information. That deadline to apply is next Friday, just a reminder. And for all of our AP students, we need you to log in and enroll in your online AP courses by this Friday. Okay, so we're wrapping up now. Some ending thoughts for parents. So you are obviously a very important part of this process, and I enjoy and appreciate you reaching out and appreciate your communication. And I really hope that we can work together this year to empower your students to take ownership of this process. So really encourage your students to be the one completing their applications, drafting their essay, formatting that resume. Obviously, you offer to be there to help, review a draft, answer any questions they might have, but really help them take ownership of this process. If they encounter challenges, whether that's in the application process or in classes or otherwise, encourage them to be the ones to try to problem solve, self-advocate, reach out for additional assistance. It's super important that this year we make sure that we are fostering the type of independence and the accountability that we want students to take with them wherever they go in their next step after BHS. So encourage students to be the ones to reach out to teachers, counselors, college admissions representatives with their questions, with their concerns. It speaks volumes to us on the high school side and on the college side when they're hearing directly from the students. We see the students, their initiative and their preparedness for college and their willingness to take on that responsibility. So encourage your students to really step up. Also, I know the stress level is probably high for both students and parents. Help students keep this process in perspective. Just remind them that where they go does not determine who they are. Ending thoughts for students. Senior year does matter. Focus on doing well in your classes and finishing your high school career on a strong and positive note. I know this might not be the senior year that you were expecting or hoping for, but do your best to make the best of it. I can't emphasize enough the importance of organization. I talked about that in my Welcome to Senior Year presentation. Make sure you're using a calendar or a planner. Organize your email. I'm sure you're getting flooded with emails. Unsubscribe for colleges or organizations that you're not interested in. Use folders to organize your different types of emails. So make a different folder for every college you're applying to. Make a folder for financial aid, make a folder for scholarship, make a folder for, BHS college info for all the emails from me. Most students find it works to keep college applications and financial aid and scholarship applications separate from their BHS school email. So they use a personal email for all of that communication, which I think is a good strategy. Obviously, know your passwords, bookmark the sites that you'll use often. So students, take this opportunity to get organized just to make your senior life a little bit easier. Be mindful of the way that you're speaking to and communicating with others, both on the high school and the college side. Remember, teachers, counselors may be writing your letters of recommendation. Give us lots of good stuff that we can write about in what we see in the way that you are speaking and the way that you are acting. And as I mentioned in my note to parents, really take the lead on this process. You should be the ones completing your applications. You should be the ones reaching out to colleges and school staff. You can always CC your parents if you want to keep them in the loop, but really make sure that you're taking ownership of this process because this is your future after all. Okay, so we have reached the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for tuning in. I apologize if I went too fast. I was trying to be quick, so I will be sending out the presentation slides if you need to go back and review any information. But right now, if we do have any questions, Mrs. Jolio, feel free to chime in if you do want to give us any questions that were submitted.
Sure. So we received several questions, most of which you already answered in your presentation, but just a few that are coming in. Okay. When will students receive their decile ranking?
So the decile ranking, that chart is included in that detailed guide that I mentioned. So those 3 BHS documents, that detailed guide, and there's a table of contents to make it nice and easy to find, but that includes information about how to fill out that education section of the Common App, which is where students will indicate their decile ranking. So in that guide, it explains that students will use the cumulative GPA that is on their transcript. Again, they receive transcripts from Mrs. Hopcroft. And they can find their GPA where they fall, and then they'll find their corresponding decile.
Great. Will we receive any information on study abroad programs?
So study abroad programs, those are very specific to the different colleges and universities that students are interested in. So that is a great question to ask during a virtual rep visit or reaching out to an admission office or looking at a school's website. You'll hear from all colleges and universities that students have the opportunity to study abroad, but some colleges and universities have more structured, robust programs than others. They may have their own campus in a different country where they have their own professors that go with students, it might be up to the student to figure out which college or university they want to study at, and then the school helps facilitate that process. So it's important for students to really research, based on the schools they're looking at, what kind of study abroad programs are being offered at that school. And if students have specific questions, there are some schools that are known for their study abroad programs, and I can provide some of those names so they can feel free to reach out to me individually.
Okay, great. We talked about the school day SAT happening on October 14th. One question was, do students need to register through College Board for that SAT, or are they automatically registered? I can help answer that. Brookfield High School will automatically register those students for the October 14th in-school SAT. So students do not need to go on College Board and register. We will also order the exam for them. Students will be asked to RSVP in a sense to indicate whether or not they do plan to take the test that day so that we can appropriately plan.
Yes, and I'll be sending out that email tomorrow, so look for that.
Perfect. And then we just received a couple of very student-specific questions regarding student schedules for this year. So we would just encourage you to please just reach out to your son or daughter's school counselor to get those questions answered.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. As I mentioned, I'll be sending out the recording and the presentation slides tomorrow. As Mrs. Jolio alluded to, feel free to reach out to me with any specific questions at any time or set up an appointment. I'm here to help, and I'm excited to work with all of our seniors this year. So stay well, everyone. Have a good night, and we will go ahead and be signing off.